Call to order the April 8th meeting of the Mobility Planning and Coordination Committee. I'm just gonna do a roll call for who's here. James Goldstein.
Here.
Duncan Allen. Here. Paul Malta. Here. Shane Mark.
Here.
Tyler Gabrielski.
Here.
And Tim Bolger, acting chair, here. The next agenda item is to approve the minutes from March 11th, but I didn't receive any minutes, so
Yeah,
so no one else received any minutes, so
I thought I did.
did you?
Oh, yeah, I did.
I thought I had some, they were appended to the end
Yeah,
of the. of
2
the
pages
agenda.
after the
Oh, were
agenda.
they? Okay.
Maybe
Yeah.
that screwed you guys up, because that's how I did it on my other committee, but maybe that was,
I did look at them and I personally thought they were fine, but maybe hold off
Okay.
until everyone has a chance to.
Yeah.
so maybe you want to table it. for
We
next-
table that for the next meeting, yeah. Okay. And, debrief, following the semi-annual transportation committees from March, what worked well and what can be improved. Does anybody have any comments?
Yeah, so I thought that, you know, as the person that was talking a lot, I guess I would just invite anyone to let me know if there was anything that you had questions about that I didn't bring up, or you wanted more detail on, or maybe the format of it, how we could do that differently and more successfully.
Yeah, the question was, there was sort of the mandated planned content that everybody understood was gonna be there, and it was pretty straightforward, and might have been interesting to a whole lot of people beyond the two game, but, that's what it is. I'm just kind of wondering, from a housekeeping point of view, how we make sure that the constituent committees are having meaningful conversation with each other. And whether we use these meetings as an opportunity to discover that no, we're not, and we have things to talk about, or whether in fact there are regular channels of communication and there may be a working session component to such a meeting. That's just a question.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
I would agree.
I mean, I view this committee as the venue for coordinating and communicating. At least from the Rail Trail Advisory, I don't think we need another one or interaction with the Transportation Safety Committee, but if this isn't adequate, then by all means, we could have additional, bilateral.
Something else to note is that we will have another meeting in the fall, about sort of the budgetary, aspect of things, so that might have more opportunities for cross-pollination and discussion. As written in the charge, the scope of the meeting that we in the spring was pretty specific, but I feel like we kind of built it out a little bit to include just, I think maybe next time we can spend a little bit more time on the introduction, just to make it a little bit more fleshed out for each group, maybe have a couple highlights, nothing too serious, but.
I thought it went well. I mean, obviously I'm participating and I know what's going on, and there weren't many people there, and I don't know how many people were online. Did you receive any feedback from the non-committee?
A lot of people asked me for the link for the
Mhm.
recording.
That's good.
The Needham Observer, they had a lot of questions that forwarded them later, and then I think the link was shared around. I think so maybe that's a good point, Jim. Maybe just publicizing it and seeing if we can get more participation. I mean, it is ultimately kind of a half internal meeting, but
Yeah.
if we're gonna do all this preparation, it'd be good to.
That was good content to have available.
Right.
Yeah.
And, so I think that was, the meeting was just fine. I'm just, if that's gonna be kind of a core informational piece of the spring meeting, then the fall one is some tables of numbers with dollar signs in front of them. Again, there's a set of people who's gonna be interested in those as well. But perhaps, as you suggested, you know, that it's not the venue for figuring what do we have to tell each other? And it becomes a little bit more of a set piece, which isn't necessarily a bad thing.
I was thinking, in the charge, it's about aligning our goals between the three groups, so, and maybe we already kind of gave our introduction this year and next year, you know, maybe I thought each individual group would make their own goals for 2025. I mean, we talk about that between the three and then see, you know, like the traffic safety committee was working on traffic calming some streets, and we're working on streets, kind of designing our own kind of traffic calming. And these streets you're working on might fit into these things that we're trying to kind of put together. So I think if each group had like a goal, and what they were looking to accomplish for 2025, this next one. And that's what we should talk about next year. And then, you know, the meeting in the fall, we could progress on those goals, you know, did we meet them or, you know?
Would it help, being that we have representatives on this committee that represent all three committees, maybe quarterly doing just like a quick brief on, so maybe James could once a quarter just brief this committee on what they've been working on. If then we could brief here, and if they did that on each committee, then all the committees are aware of what's going on, you know, so Justin could bring back what's going on at the traffic safety committee, do a quick brief. James could do it from the rail trail, and then we already know what's going on here because you're part of it monthly. And then perhaps you could suggest the same as part of the rail trail is like that, because if each committee is kind of briefing out what everybody's talking about, then I see some of that natural flow already occurring there. So that, to your point, Duncan, we don't get to 6 months down the road and now we're trying to cram and figure out, okay, what are the other committees doing to catch ourselves up to speed?
Well, I guess that's also, you know, dependent on how often we meet. as a committee, which is something we're talking about, so.
Yep.
You know,
Yeah, I mean, if we, if there's a meet, there, you know, I guess we're getting into the next, future item, but we may be meeting less, so.
Yeah.
There may be preparation for those meetings and then those meetings, and then that might be all we meet for the year, so, there may not be opportunity to have like a constant update from each of the separate committees. And the rail trail committee doesn't meet very often.
We generally meet quarterly,
Quarterly.
but it hasn't always happened.
Yeah,
But that is our schedule.
Well, maybe it just should be a regular. If this committee ends up meeting quarterly or near quarterly, maybe it just should be a regular agenda item. Just to kind of go around the room and have everybody say their piece about what their owners of the role they're doing.
sure.
Yeah.
I think the traffic safety committee has like an ongoing list of like things they're working on, right? Like there's a status update list. Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, we have a status update list. I have also my own list.
Okay.
It's hard to keep track of a lot of requests. So.
That sounds about right. I mean, from my perspective, not every month for this meeting. But as needed, we could add a meeting or two if, you know, if necessary, if there's something that needs to happen. And we don't have a meeting for a couple of months, we could, I assume, schedule one.
Yeah,
But quarterly in general sounds right to me. And I think Shane's idea about, you know, updating each time is, each quarter is probably a good one. I mean, very briefly, but what each
Yeah.
committee's been doing.
could always be a special meeting if, like you said, if required or.
Well, it'd be a recurring item, and if there's nothing, there's nothing.
Right.
Yeah, but just to close the loop on the spring meeting. Yeah, I think it's a good idea for the goals. I think it's good to have goals at the beginning of the year, see how things went at the end of the year. think that's a good way to handle it. I was wondering if, you know, how much of it we want to do sort of each year, kind of go through some of the same intros and some of the shit, you know, it's like some people obviously will not have seen a previous iteration of it. So do we like that format of kind of doing intros at the beginning and then DPW does its thing?
I mean, the format was fine, the content was at a good level. Is that the best and most efficient way to get that information out there? And is it, you know, the best use of time? I think it is probably a perfect good use of time, but that's kind of more public facing, which is, again, fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think when we originally talked about these meetings, it was not entirely clear whether this was a, you know, public facing information opportunity or something that was going to help make the committees work better together. And maybe that isn't entirely settled yet.
Well, I think it's both, actually,
Yeah.
in my opinion, it's not either or.
And I see that potentially evolving as the committee continues.
Yeah.
You know, to your point, it's a brand new committee, so everyone's kind of feeling our way through it on what should be included, what do we need to talk about, how do we format these meetings, and perhaps since we're meeting twice a year as a joint group, maybe one of those meetings is more of a informational meeting like we did, and then maybe another meeting becomes like a public input or question answer cycle. I don't know, but
Yeah,
you know, there's nothing wrong with flipping those around so that it's not the same presentation every 6 months.
I just think the other thing, I mean, traffic safety already sort of has a, you know, a pre-made package and a work program sitting out there that's, you know, easy to talk about and is, you know, relatively easy to track and portray and what have you. And if I think of the rail trail, I think there are these sort of
Long-term.
issues, you know, the
Issues and
continuity, what do we
projects,
do
yeah.
about getting to the south, what do we do
Right.
about crossing 128, what, you know.
Yeah.
That are all kind of simmering on independent, you know,
Mhm.
unlinked time
Mhm.
situations, and obviously you want updates on that, but also we don't want to miss opportunities to jump on something that, you know, could advance the cause.
Right.
And, you know, I'm not sure what the, you know, the best way of doing that is. And, you know, and this committee sort of has a work product of, you know, a scope and a planning type activity, which again is fairly indefinite, but I think warrants, and this would be our us meeting, warrants a lot of attention to how much we put in there. Because, you know, major metropolitan areas, when they do something like this, they grow like topsy. There's not a topic that won't be in there with 20 pages of coffee table book. And, you know, spent 100, 200 grand before you just got an inventory of what's out there. And maybe that's not the best model for Anita. We need to just, you know, look at some of our peers and think about what do we actually need to have, and, you know, and does it in fact need to be a comprehensive plan, or can there be a plan for this and plan for that, and plan for that?
Yeah. I think that's a good point, because I think considering we started off like this, it's a good base to build upon. Maybe next time we refine it a little bit, but we probably want to be conscious of not making it into a 2.5 hour meeting, right? We want to keep it concise and effective,
And the first one was it was under an hour and a half, wasn't it?
something like that.
Yeah.
It's hard for me. I was just like talking.
Yeah.
I think it was less than an hour, to be honest with you.
I think it was more than an
very
hour,
fast.
Yeah,
but it was,
The Zenith channel cut you up mostly, and it was really good. When they cut it up, it was
Oh, they cut it up.
they did
I
a.
haven't watched it.
Yeah,
I
and it's hard to watch, but
I can't watch
this.
this.
It was really good.
Thank you.
It ended up being a
Um,
good presentation.
in terms of the 2 meetings a year, I thought you said, and I don't know if this is in the charge or not, but I actually like this idea that the first one is this public facing introduction about the committees and their priorities. And I think we all did that. Priorities and goals are pretty similar in my mind.
Yeah.
Not exactly, but close. And the fall one, I thought you said, Kyler, and I think this makes sense, is more about the DPW's budget, and, you know, what's on the, agenda to fund and perhaps roughly when. Is that the case, or am I misunderstanding what the fall meeting was kind of?
I believe that's in the
Outline.
charge or something like it is.
Okay.
So it says
Yeah, I
that,
probably had that too.
or I guess it kind of lumps in both together.
It
It
says
says-
semi-annual.
Yeah, it says
Oh,
like
okay.
this, the meetings will occur in, you know, biannually. Purpose of the joint meetings is to align activities, projects and planning initiatives to facilitate public awareness of current and planned projects. So maybe I think that was something that Kara said perhaps,
Mm.
and that's where I got that from.
Mhm.
But I think it could be effective to have, you know, because by the time we're talking about it in the spring, the plans are pretty much baked, right?
Right.
It's a little bit late to change course, in terms of like swapping things in and out. But the fall is when we have the opportunity to kind of like map out where we're gonna go. So it's probably a good idea to have that as the,
As a
you
focus.
know, okay, this was our priority this year. How do we build onto this for the next time so that when we're at the spring meeting, we can say, these are the things that we're planning that we have lined up, right? So I think that could be effective. When we have enough information, like, it'll be time so that we have enough information to come up with a preliminary plan, but early enough where we can still take feedback into account and move some things around if we need.
Mhm.
Just kind of ask for funding if we need it.
Part of it may depend on just what we deem a project to consist of. And I guess my feeling is that there are probably at least one project for each of the other two committees that doesn't sort of maintain the usual laundry list of here are all the specific, you know, streets and project limits, and that's a, you know, conventional sort of civil engineering approach to projects. But, you know, in my mind, the rail trail has at least one, which is they're interested in, if not responsible for implementing, but that's the community way. You know, and I mean, that's actually something that's gonna happen and people should be aware of and updated about it. All right, which is which is, in my opinion, is likely to happen.
Yeah.
All right. But I mean, you know, the signs are looking positive, I think. And I don't know whether, you know, there's any funding aspect of that. It's likely to be round in this fall.
Not this fall, no. I think the more likely and more timely one is the extension to Chestnut Street, and even that
Okay.
is a couple years
Okay,
away.
but yeah, that's not a real thing.
Oh, yeah, no,
That-
that's gonna happen, in my opinion, eventually,
Some limits. and
but the,
We'll have some
the
dollars at some point.
community way is tens of millions, that's a whole nother
And
issue.
so I'm just sort of thinking that
Yeah.
even though it may come across as a little bit more nebulous than, you know, here are the projects and we got our cherry sheets down there and then, yeah, all this money's in order and here it is. There are some analogous things
Mhm.
possibly
Yeah.
in those two entities that come to mind. And then to the extent we actually get ourselves together and say we're gonna have, you know, plan X or plan Y, then, you know, implementing those plans, the master plan elements or whatever you wanna call them, also become kind of projects in their own right that we can report and update on.
I should also mention that for instance, for transportation safety, DBW, their behalf requests funding annually
Mhm.
for their activities to cover improvements that we might make. And this past fall, we started to formalize a trail maintenance program that includes sort of maintenance, but also could things that might be considered upgrades could fit into that as well. So that might be something that we would be looking for your input and perspective on as we're creating that submission. Make sure it aligns with your priorities, if it's the sort of work that you want to see done. So those kinds of things that are on a rotating basis, like that's, it doesn't have to be like a full-blown, million or $2 million project. It can be some things that are more in your realm, but not.
Right. There already is a
Above.
very small line item for the rail trail maintenance. It's very small. I don't know if you remember what it is. It's maybe $25,000 a year or maybe even less. But it's for mowing and a little bit of, tree work
trimming,
maybe,
yeah.
but it's very minor. Like, it can't handle anything really significant, but
So-
it's very nice to have.
I
but-
think that's what Tyler's talking about, is if I'm not mistaken, I don't have the budget here in front of me, of course, but I believe that Ed asked for
Yes.
that to be increased, recognizing that that's not,
Yeah, it's not adequate, yeah.
that that's
Well-
not getting us where we.
If it's, I'm not sure if that's separate from. Cause this was like a capital article,
Oh, yeah,
but
so we have the operating and the capital. so
yeah,
Using them both together.
but that might be a vehicle for like. If there's a certain. Upgrade that you wanna make to the trail that you think that the committee is prioritizing. And we have it in the queue for just laying down more stone dust or
Yeah,
something, then.
Shane's aware of it. Yes, we have exactly that. And I've been hounding him for a little while.
Yeah,
And, but the select board has pushed it off a bit.
yeah, well, that would be the time to have those discussions. at
Yes.
least, Yeah,
Yes, we'd like to get it done as soon as possible because the trail is hurting.
right. So I'm just trying to think of, that's kind of like the connections that you might have.
Mhm.
Um, DPW is kind of the middleman, the conduit for that, for those requests.
Yes.
Do we think that part of what our strategy could be is to come up with a plan or strategies that allow us to free up money that can then be allocated to some of the things that have shortcomings? Like, is part of what we want to do is find efficiencies in our approach that allow us to fund more appropriately fund other real shovel-ready projects, or what?
Are you talking about, like digging into DPW's budget generally, or like what do
Well, I
you?
think like, so, one of the things that we've talked about is how do we reduce the amount of sidewalks that we have to maintain?
Right,
And so if we're able to find a strategy that does that successfully, like, what does that do to the budget? Does it allow the budget to just go back into the backlog, or does it allow the budget to take some of those funds that were allocated to sidewalk and to like reallocate them to projects that are going on with other committees? And so like, that's how we mesh between the committees, sort of act as a way to balance.
yeah,
I don't know, just,
I think this committee needs to discuss that program before really that question can be answered.
yeah,
My understanding was that the objective was to allow us to rehabilitate existing sidewalk on the other side of the street if we're gonna be removing. That was the sort of pilot that was proposed, but it could be that the committee or others think that there's some other way we should do that, so I don't think it's been discussed yet.
Well, not that I'm in DPW in any way, but I think the backlog of everything, streets, sidewalks, everything is so big and so long that it's simply a matter of when rail trail stuff might be a priority, and it's very small dollars compared to the DPW's overall road and sidewalk stuff. Except the community way, that's a significant project, but even the extension is, in the ballpark of $1 million something, which is not huge for DPW, it's huge for the rail trail. But anyway, so I don't think efficiency is, at least the way I would look at finding funding for it. It's more, when is it a priority? And there's a little bit of advocacy involved in that, and it's as much with the select board as it is with the DPW, I think, because they do have annual goals and so forth. And I believe DPW and the select board are in very close touch about all of that. And DPW puts forward its own priorities each year to the select board, I believe. For funding and anyway.
Yeah. I just think it hasn't been built out yet, so we can't really, but I think it makes sense to. When we're looking at. The sort of oversight and the advisory role that the committee plays, like. That is something, sort of reallocating our existing efforts, I think that's on the table.
I think going back and looking at the main, because I was just looking at the charges
Yeah,
on the, so, because it kind of seems like we're still kind of struggling with like, what's our function? So I would recommend maybe everybody goes back and looks at the mobility planning coordination committee page and those 6 or 7 items that talks about in broadness what our charge is and what we should be doing, and then, you know, to that point, I think I agree with Tim, is maybe that's where we are, the goals of the committee should be just picking away at like, okay, what items do we pick away at this year? And then what items do we pick away at next year to keep that process going? Because I do agree with what you said, Paul, but I think to Tyler's point, which is on the agenda item, is having that comprehensive transportation plan in place will really help to guide some of the decisions or where the committee goes with these items.
Good point.
yeah, advise and coordinate with town staff and other committees on the prioritization of mobility related capital. Infrastructural improvements, including anticipated funding sources. So, pretty broad.
Yeah, but it does specifically mention that.
Yeah, so that's why I mentioned it, because as I was reading through there, it kind of talks about the various things everybody's saying. So
Yeah, I
it might
forgot.
be good for just everybody to kind
Yeah,
of
funding.
read that, refresh.
Good with that? Alright, so the next item is the update on the transportation plan scoping from the MAPC.
So at our last meeting, I was scheduled to meet with the consultant the next day. So it's been a little while since I met with him, but essentially, his name is Travis Pollock at the MAPC, and he had, a pretty good handle on what it was that we were looking for. He said that he had worked on similar projects in the past, so that was gonna help with helping us build out the scope. And NAPC seems to be a fan of our plan, and thinks that more municipalities should do that as well. So one of the things that we talked about was hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Hello.
We're just doing an update on the master plan. One of the things that he mentioned was that just to send him everything we could think of in terms of what we want to see pulled from, alluded to, referenced by the plan. So I sent him a bunch of materials about the town's complete streets prioritization list, the various committee charges and different material. I had some stuff for the community way we sent over, but some of these other things were not in my realm, or maybe before I came onto the scene. So if any of you has anything that you think might be useful, even if it's just for reference, feel free to send it to me and I can forward it over to him. But he did literally right before this meeting, send me a draft scope for us to review.
Great.
So we can take a look at that and then see what we think should be added.
Great.
So this was, like I said, it was just sent over. I'm going to. Let's share this. So this is a summary of what they're helping us with. Develop a scope of work to select a vendor who will assist the town in creating and adopting a master plan or street design and policy guide. The plan will help to determine a street classification system, potential treatments based upon different street types. And can then assist the town in implementing different infrastructure treatments based upon factors such as safety, use type, traffic data, land development, zoning, connectivity, and common destinations. And then the town will use the scope to procure consultants to complete the master plan.
Can I just ask, does the town already have a system for condition reporting and tracking condition of streets, condition of sidewalks? And is that here?
Yeah, so that's what I presented on at the
Right.
meeting.
And is that mentioned here or not?
So what do you think is the connection between like, my understanding was that the master plan was a policy document, not a maintenance document, like maintenance not being.
Yeah, I agree. It's a policy document. It, wouldn't, okay. I would think that condition would inform policy.
We may be on the same page with this in terms of
Go ahead, maybe you can articulate better than I can.
planners love to create inventories. And they become sort of coffee table books and reference documents. And if we have a lot of this stuff already, in GIS and organized and everything, I think we probably have to be careful not to turn them loose to reprocess and represent a lot of stuff that we have. Just thinking about that, we
So
might
how do
have
we
to say
take it?
more about what we were expecting to do. And, again, they're pointing to two examples of plans that they like. And so, we've got to look at them and see if we think that those are in fact good ones. And I will plan to get you something on that general order, it's kind of like, those are fine. Maybe, they're a little more urban than we are. And,
Yeah,
Minneapolis does great stuff, but,
I don't think we're copying their street design. I think it's the format of.
I know, but even so, in terms of scale, Minneapolis, or scale or scope, are you going to spend a lot of time talking about, bus stop designs when MTA has their own bus stop?
Sure. I imagine what this project being much smaller than those other guys.
Yeah.
Because it's not being as in-depth, with, not as many streets, but something that's very local to Needham, I think would fit well, which would be a much smaller guide than what, at least the Minneapolis ones I haven't seen the show on it. The street design guide. But I don't think they're planning on having this large book for Needham, so to speak. But certainly looking at what.
I mean, somewhere to articulate that, rather than just let language stand.
I think what this plan would do is incorporate, so to your
Yes.
point,
Oh, yeah.
the MBTA already has their set guidelines for bus stops. So I would imagine this plan would incorporate what already exists for the MBTA with the understanding that under most situations, we would have a conversation with the MBTA on, hey, can we tweak this a little bit depending on the scope or the size of different projects that we have. Another great plan to potentially look at, and well, I don't know if it's a great plan or not, but another plan to potentially look at is just right next door. So Newton just did this a couple of years ago. And so they have a whole street design guide as well. Of course, we're not Newton sized, nor do we particularly necessarily want to be like Newton, but it's got some, there's a lot of common elements in all of these plans. And I think the key for all of this is bringing it in and making sure that we have the Needham flavor to it, and that it's just not a cookie cutter of what other agencies have done.
yeah, I think, we might wanna, so shortly after my meeting or. With Travis, Shane pointed me to the Newton Street Design Guide. We're probably more similar to Newton than we are in Minneapolis, right?
Sure.
So, that's definitely something that. You know, a lot of people to take a look at and compare and contrast. But he's also, you know. He's not necessarily specifically familiar with Needham, but he is, you know, at the MAPC, you know, he's not like from New York or California, you know, so, but I do want to go back to what you're saying about the maintenance, because,
It wasn't about maintenance. If I can just,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Mel, I know
No,
you've
no,
been
please.
waiting. Just to clarify, implementing various street infrastructure treatments based upon factors such as, and I was thinking condition would be one of those factors. That's the only thing I was saying, but it's not listed here. And
okay,
I'm not sure if it should be or not, but in my mind, it would make sense to include it. But let me ask the DPW folks or the rail transportation experts, doesn't condition affect what treatment you would use?
yes, there are treatments that are maintenance treatments, and then there are infrastructure treatments that are, like traffic calming, right? That's not
Right, not based on
It
condition.
is a treatment, but it's a different sort of treatment, right?
Okay.
But I do agree that when we're prioritizing different areas, like obviously condition or, yeah, the condition will play a role. We're not going to. Yeah, I think it's fair to say that it's a
Yeah.
factor that should play into it,
Yeah,
yeah.
that
But
was
I
the
just
only,
don't think it's gonna
only
be a
question.
big.
One thing, the scope.
Yeah.
I don't see anything that talks about the environment and street trees and plantings that are often, and even in the history of this town, been sacrificed and sometimes for no purpose.
Yeah.
So I think it should be an explicit part of the scope to at least know what the implication is for the natural environment that abuts streets.
And just along with that, I would add probably or we may wanna add like into that stormwater features too. Or even if we don't even mention that, it's just climate resiliency. As part of our,
Right.
which includes all of those items that Mo just mentioned.
The Minneapolis Street Guide does have green infrastructure included in all of their.
That's great.
Yeah, so. Street, green infrastructure, sidewalk,
Yeah,
it's included.
maybe we should look through the whole thing and then we know what's in it.
How long is this document?
Not as long as you'd expect. This
Should we
is-
take a copy or?
Oh, it's only two and a half pages?
It's
Oh.
4
4
pages, but it
pages, okay.
includes,
Signature,
some language
yeah.
on
Boilerplate.
MAPCs.
Yeah. So it's quite short, so we can actually go through it.
Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so we can go through it. So the anticipated outcome, so this is where we would throw in,
The next paragraph does start off with. The word that I always worry about.
It's sort of making the inventory almost foundational. You know, the plan, you know, foundational document that, includes an inventory. I've seen so many cases where the inventory just grows to take over the entire document to sink the ship.
But it's inventory of types,
Yeah,
not,
but I mean, what does that really mean?
I
I
thought that
think
was.
I'm hearing
A
Duncan's
list of
concern.
types or a massive, here are the 155 streets we have, and they seem to fall into these 17 groups.
Are you saying that you're concerned that they'll take our inventory and make that the engagement? And we won't get the value?
I'm a little bit of a concern in that.
That's what I'm hearing.
dimension. And to me, inventory, depending on your scope and what you think the available effort and budget are, I've seen inventories from, half a page to, 60 or 80 pages. And you can go into incredible detail, while at the same time perhaps not really informing your thinking about functional classification or whatever we're gonna call
So right now, we don't have any inventory.
it. Right, I know. Well,
So it's hard to make any decisions policy wise. So, because when I talked to him when we were scoping this out, I thought that that's what we were looking for out of the plan, was that it would be a starting point where it would have, okay, this is a collector street. These are the types of things that are found in a collector street. This is the baseline recommendations for a collector street for complete streets infrastructure, for this, for that. And then we sort of add and subtract as context would dictate, or the
well, we're definitely talking different words when you use inventory there. When I think of inventory as it's commonly used in most scopes for most transportation projects. And what I sense you're articulating there is getting a structure or a classification or something, and not just a laundry list of what's out there.
well, that's why it says up here
It's to
that
classify what's out there.
Okay.
it says, that can then assist the town in implementing various treatments based upon these factors. So it's not just, we have the inventory and then it's done, right? There's recommendations, not specific to each location. That's kind of why we're doing it this way, because it's not, okay, here is X street and Y street, consultants tell us what we should be doing. That's kind of the role of this committee, if I'm not mistaken, right?
So Tyler, can you scroll down and let's see the rest of that paragraph? And then the second thing is, I do hear Duncan's concern, and it sounds like what you may be concerned with, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, is getting too deep in the weeds on the inventory as opposed to basic inventory of functional
Right, I think
classification.
understanding what
Yeah.
needs to happen and the kind of,
So maybe that's what we just put
Facilities
as
that
functional
make it happen.
classification of
as
roads.
opposed to having a giant bundle of, from
The
Mount
rest of
Woods,
them.
whatever, to Wamos, whatever, this is whatever, and it's got somebody right away, I mean.
Yeah, I read inventory of types as classification. So I don't think it's just listing every road, so it's
I just don't- I
it's
don't want them to
classifying,
start
and
to
then-
do that.
and then
Just
I
like
assume-
inventory now.
you would assign each road or street into a class.
Dedham has this integrated into their GIS
Mhm.
system, so you can, when you look at it, it's like, this is a collector road, this is a local road.
Oh, well, that's another one to look at then, and,
And that's typically done at the state level, so the state will, because the state has an inventory of our roadways, they do this for every town. And the state will look and say, based upon this data, this road falls into this functional category.
so not only state roads, but all municipal roads
Yeah,
too.
they
Oh,
take a
wow.
look at that in general, because I've seen it in a few different documents where they'll say like, this road is a arterial, this road is a.
And is that not a good starting point for this?
No, I think it's a decent starting point for it, but it is in the GIS, it should be in our GIS mapping, so it's something that we can, check on our end on to what degree do we spell that out for our roadway network here in Needham.
Can you increase
Functional
the
level.
type size on that?
Second motion, okay.
That's
Is
great.
that good?
Thank you.
Yeah, I think, so just from my knowledge of the pavement condition index, or the road surface rating. There's only classification, based on the layer that they're using from some larger source that is not very granular. It's like, highway, arterial,
Other.
residential,
I
or
see,
something like that,
okay.
right? So it doesn't, but that's not even, in our current system, I don't have the ability to toggle those different types,
Mm.
sort by different type. This is, so theoretically, once we have this classification, we could then integrate it with our GIS tools, and then that would help us when we're planning. I could just say, okay, let's look at all of our collectors or arterials, and that's what would pop up. So I think that, yeah, the GIS compatibility and fitting it into our existing planning systems is something that this could help with too.
Good.
So I think we were down
Yeah.
here. So this is. So when I told him about the street design guide and all that stuff, I didn't expect him to like specifically reference it in the scope. But it might be useful as like a kind of reference point, but maybe we want to be more. I thought he would kind of take those portions out.
What are you referring to right now? I'm sorry, I didn't
Where he
follow.
says similar, develop, the goal is for us to develop a guide similar to.
Oh,
these,
yeah,
Right?
we can edit that.
So
yeah.
he gets into. Some of these goals and stuff down here. This is the actual tab. Well, let's get to that in a second. I guess I just meant to say that I thought he would break it down more into the pieces and then kind of. Find the commonalities and then spell that out a little bit more, but maybe, yeah, that's more down with specific. So foundational document includes an inventory, blah, 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 and designs and treatments for each street type that will guide the town staff, committee, elected officials, residents, and businesses for future capital projects and plans. The plan will create a shared vocabulary, vision, and guide for streets and transportation infrastructure. Plan will also include the needs of historically marginalized populations, including people who do not drive or drive less, children, and transit riders. These populations make up a disproportionate number of people that are injured or killed in crashes.
I don't have a problem with that, but where do pedestrians and bicyclists and non-motorized, is that mentioned?
That's,
I
there is
think that
transit
there's a-
riders are at the end of sentence there.
Yeah, I think this is kind of in addition to.
Okay, as long as it's assumed it's in
It's
there.
lumped in with like street
Okay.
design and street type design.
I'm still struggling with that sentence about the inventory. I'm wondering with an alternative phrasing. Could you please run it back up so that sentence is short and yeah, the plan will be a foundational document.
Includes.
Can we, let me say that establishes a classification of recommended street and trail types.
Good.
Be careful not getting your border on the line of a planner, right?
Right, yeah.
They recruit you, put you to work.
And I think you have.
Is there not a
supposed to on.
standard set of those already? Not necessarily if you need them, but I mean.
That's what it was referred to.
Commonly
There.
accepted.
There's a lot of different ones. We have to come up
The
with one
other
that fits.
escape clause we can put in there that I use a lot is a comma, informed by laundry list of whatever we happen to know we have on hand. So informed by, whatever it's got in the way of a GIS and wherever it's got in the way of a classification. Not, to recognize that there may be resources that, they can grab and work with. And we're not necessarily kind of just throw it out what we got.
Yeah, so, let's see if there's something in here that. Yeah, review previous plans and existing conditions.
Yeah.
this is a task for. This is the task for NAPC, this is not the scope for the actual plan itself, this is what they're going to do. for
And
us.
These are, you know, a pretty typical laundry list of things you're gonna, I'm just thinking if particularly if the town has specific resources that we think would be really valuable to them in doing this, I think it would be helpful to point them out. If you are GIS includes whatever, you know, we have this, and sometimes you guys are writing a contract, it's, you know, the town will provide. blah, 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 blah. I don't think you necessarily have to go that far, but I'm just a little concerned that they might sort of reinvent wheels that might not need to be reinvented.
Yeah, no, I think it's fair to, add that, say, you know, the plan will be, informed by,
Needham's existing material, you know,
Yeah.
you can be vague now because Tyler already said he sent over some stuff, and if anyone has additional things that are relevant, you know, we should add them,
yeah,
so they are not starting from scratch.
because whoever ultimately, is, the consultant that's selected from the scope. We're gonna give them all the same stuff, you know, that's what they're gonna start with.
Yep.
So, okay, so we'll explicitly, we'll address that. So I think that's good for anticipated outcomes. This is saying that the scope of work should support the Metro Common 2050 transportation goals. Is this,
That's the regional long-term
the
plan. right?
regional plan?
Yeah, that's the regional long-term plan. They had Metro Futures before this one.
So it's their plan, right?
It's their plan, and it's for everything, housing, this, but they have a major transportation section too. And it's regional, of course. It's all,
Okay.
what is it, 177 communities or whatever it is from, no, 101.
Right, and that makes sense that they wanna draw that connection. then.
Yeah.
So those goals are also part of this framework.
Yeah, and here's the bike and pedestrian stuff is in here.
Yeah, yeah. So that's fair. So this is stuff that Travis and MAPC will be doing for us.
So on that, on number 2, again, you've identified a couple of perhaps even more appropriate ones, Newton, maybe Dedham, I'm not sure, but you mentioned that, so those could be added here as well.
Yeah.
At one point, we did. When we were looking at some transit stuff, came up with a list of peer communities for Needham, sort of around 128. I'm tempted to dig that out if I can find it. Just, I have the Braintree for some reason, the other things are.
Concord, Franklin, Lexington.
Yeah, Concord has.
Yeah, I mean, they would have to be both sort of peers and have good documents.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'd have to rummage.
Concord is doing a major comprehensive transportation plan project, so,
I think any we can think of, we probably ought to look at and consider adding.
I mean, in so many ways, we think of ourselves as unique and we're not.
Yeah.
So,
we can be.
Don't say that.
it can be, right, but
Right.
a lot of our issues are the same as others.
Very wise words.
I do think it's interesting that the only time, at least so far, that we've seen in the document as we've scrolled through it, there hasn't been any mention of climate resilience side in your suggestion. I do think that's interesting. And sort of,
Is it in there?
Given the other bad things that are up there, I
Uh-huh.
think, yeah, that makes.
So it does say,
oh, okay.
Here.
Okay.
but yeah, I think we want them to be. We want it to be explicitly referred to in the sort of general scope sections, right?
We have the climate action plan, Needham has a transportation section, so I guess we can send that to them as well.
Yeah.
Good suggestion.
One thing I note here, from my old perspective as the transportation committee for transit, is all the bullet points there don't really say anything about transit. It often winds up becoming the second class citizen as people rush to do active transportation. And they don't realize that, buses get wound up in second place.
Yeah. So I don't know whether that can be drafted in
You
there
want it to be
somewhere.
bigger
Somewhere.
I would here somewhere. I mean, I'm looking further down, look at those lettered items. It is at the end there, okay, but my bigger concern is we work our way down to those lettered areas. And it talks about the zero accidents, it's all the, very frequent laundry list of good planning objectives. My problem is it seems to be silent, okay, it starts here. Access to everybody, that's modally agnostic.
Yeah, it's
You
just,
have
great term.
underserved, it's talking about the underserved by high quality transport, that's not. The flip side of that is there should be high quality transit to everybody, which will bankrupt us, and. It's just, I worry that, I don't know, some sort of strict application of those high principles is might take us off the road somewhere. So.
Yeah, so
so I think the part of the classification system would include like. Streets that are proximate to transit or connectors to transit, like I think that's part of the classification. It could-
Are also
streets on
compatible
which-
with transit, for example, bus routes.
Streets are appropriate for transit. In other words, the thing that nobody likes to talk about is, bikes and buses. And many places are, deciding that, well, why don't we get the cars out of this lane? We still have buses around. We'll have them share with the bikes and. We have a lot of. Slow buses in, complete street sections nationwide now, and. It's a compromise, but the compromise is always in favor of modes other than transit. Where do the buses make up their time? Do they have any exclusive lanes? Do they?
I think that's fair.
The transit data. is one of these
That's
things, so-
priority in there.
Yeah,
Somewhere, I don't see exactly where it fits, but.
I'm just thinking that in those long list of principles, and then it's still. We can just think, that clump right there, I think. Emphasis on neighborhoods historically underserved by high quality transit, which is not quite the same thing as take care of transit. Local land use, bicycles, pedestrians, and, every other.
concentrated growth around
Chasing
transit.
equity. Linked to other modes, transportation options, there's zero for.
Yeah, I can just
Carbon
ask him to
emissions.
highlight it
Yeah.
more throughout.
Okay, I mean, it's fine.
He's gonna work on it, right? So we could put transit, question mark, he can.
Yeah, I mean.
Public transportation, whatever you wanna call it.
The other thing I wanna just mention is like, obviously there's things we can do to encourage, to lay the groundwork for the transit system. But ultimately, we're not the builders,
Yeah.
right? So it makes sense that there is a bit more of a focus on the things that are within our realm of control.
Yeah, but what we don't want to do is preclude by our actions future transit development.
Right,
But I think, some of the, who mentioned, in the context of streets with transit or appropriate for transit or something, there needs to be some protection for a robust transit operation in the future.
Well, for example, if you're talking about traffic calming by narrowing streets, you have to make sure you have enough room for a bus. I have the best street sign you have ever seen that's applicable to this sketch, which I just took last week.
All right, so yeah, I mean, this is pretty cut and dry. The timeline that they're proposing is to have a draft scope completed by the end of the summer. With a draft of the scope work in the summer, and then the final scope and budget delivered by the end of September. And then we will hold 6 meetings to coordinate and review efforts. May, June, July, August, and September. How do we want to? Should this group, should we all be part of these meetings? How do we want to do that? Because you know, obviously this is a after hours committee.
I think there are a lot of perspectives here that, you know, pretty widespread review.
Well, yeah, will he present give a presentation at some point of the status of it, or are we going like direct input from the committee while he?
Would it be appropriate to have at least a couple of these be at the meeting?
Yes.
I'd be happy to do that. Work them up.
Okay,
And I've written a lot of scopes. One of those things, and then. Sure. Well,
I mean, since it is the main thing we're working on.
Yes.
Like I'm happy to sort of be the messenger and work on it. It's my job, you know, but I also don't. I want to make sure that everybody's saying their piece.
Yeah.
Involved. I don't want to just be doing this
Yeah.
myself, you know. Okay, and
This is my experience, you know,
that's pretty much it.
posing on lots and lots of scopes of work. I find myself in a position to pretty quickly come up with what consultant questions might be, you know, what should they do? Do they really want this? What do they really mean by this? You know, should they realize how much it's gonna cost?
Yeah,
And that kind of thing, so,
well, the good thing is the first draft, and we will be
Yeah.
many more.
yeah.
So let's,
I think it fits well into the first, bullet point of our charge as well, so
yeah,
it seems to fit well, we're looking on that. Then, let's move on to the next item. Update on the downtown redesign firm selection, and the next steps.
yeah, so with the input of the select board as well as some of the other town staff that we brought in to ask questions for the different candidate firms, the selection committee decided to go with Environmental Partners Group as the design partner for the downtown, for the Great Plain Avenue corridor redesign process. The preliminary designs that were provided will be used as a jumping off point, but are by no means you know, not even close to the final design, right? There's gonna be a long process of public input. Iterations, we're gonna have to, you know, on our end, we're gonna be looking at it from a what's buildable, what's feasible, there's budgetary considerations, so all of these things will be part of the process. As it is right now, we have a scoping, our sort of kickoff scoping meeting with environmental partners in 2 weeks' time. DPW, as well as we'll have JP from economic development and a representative from planning. Probably Alex will be a part of that scoping meeting. We have questions that were sent over to us by environmental partners that we're going to be addressing during the scoping meeting. And I can just give you an idea of them. I'm not going, you know, I don't think you wanna.
Last time we did, this, we said working group, is there going to be a similar such function?
A working group, probably, yes.
I know,
That's definitely our thinking when it comes to the, once we get to the design for the scoping meeting, it's more internal.
No, I mean for the
departments, but
process in general.
Yes, definitely, but that's our thoughts is when we get to the, to the design phase, having a working group with. Of course, what that, some business representatives.
Right,
You know, have a good large broad scope.
yeah, it was pretty broad last
Yeah.
time.
I know you've already chosen them, which is
Yeah,
great, because I also would have chosen them after looking at all of the different designs.
I can,
But in the future, would our committee make a recommendation on something like this to either the select board or the DPW about which one of the plans might fit our goals? Like, I think in the chart somewhere, it's, you know, like, make recommendations to, on specific projects to the select board or we'll work with DPW. So would it have been something that we would have voted on and recommended to the select board?
yeah, it's kind of a gray area in terms of how the.
This was unique, right? This.
Yeah, But I mean, like I said before, the process is just starting, you know, we haven't designed anything yet. This committee will definitely be involved. Directly and indirectly. But I think that. That will come in the form of helping us to shape the forums for public engagement. Helping us to maybe come down on certain particulars about the design. But I think that there is a technical aspect to the selection in terms of the team's experience, their technical competence. That is more in the engineering realm.
Sure.
So, I think that it's ultimately up to the select board, and then I think the select board kind of, gave the blessing for the way that this has gone so far, and
I think with this, we're running on parallel tracks currently because we have the downtown streetscape along with the beginnings of this committee, starting to formalize some of these policies and what we'd like to see. I think some of the aspects and input for the downtown will come out of this, but then we come to future projects. The policies we set in here will definitely be implemented because they'll already be set. So as we implement future projects, we'll be looking at the policies set forth in this committee to help guide those projects.
yeah, I mean, if we had the street design guide or whatever we want to call it, that would have been very informative on the selection process, because we would have something to use as a reference point. But before we have that, it's kind of just, people have different priorities,
Sure.
people have different ideas.
I'm curious, did the quiet zone figure into that conversation at all?
As
Well,
far
we
as
have a
the
different
selection.
designer.
Okay, well, were they aware of it? Are they-
Yeah, so each committee or each consultant that presented brought aspects of the quiet zone into it as far as during their presentation saying we're aware of the quiet zone. They did not get deep into it, but they did, they definitely referenced that they're aware of a quiet zone and that however that design would need to integrate with whatever comes about with the quiet zone.
Well, one of the candidates is working with us on the quiet zone. Has been, so they were not selected, but it was one of the pieces of information that we gave them to base their proposal off of. So I can,
You're gonna skip the questions, you did not find them, or?
I couldn't find them,
Okay,
but
that's
I can share them, but I just wanna, you know, it's sort of an internal planning. I just wanna let you all know that we're having this scoping meeting. it will determine the scope of the design. Then we'll finally be able to seek a contract for the design. And then we're off to the races in terms of, they'll come up with a draft. They'll go through many, many iterations. We'll be giving updates in this forum and other forums. There'll be plenty of opportunity for everyone to take a look at it. So, we're still building out the contract right now.
But I would say if there's anything that this committee or members of this committee would like to see included in that scope, feel free to.
Yeah, so
Partner with those, because I would gather most of them is good, like the climate resiliency is gonna be part of that discussion. Peds bikes are definitely part of that discussion. It was already in the scope that we gave them to present. So a lot of the things we're talking about tonight are, you can make the assumption they're going to be included into the scoping, because that's
Makes sense.
our charge. But if there's anything that you can think of as committee members, feel free to email Tyler with that. We can
Yeah,
certainly
so
discuss it.
I can share, it's like kind of a short, like almost like a slide deck in PDF form. I'll just share that with everybody. If there's a list of questions they're gonna be asking, we won't be meeting for 2 weeks, so everyone should have plenty of time to review it. And if there's anything you want to see addressed, just let me know and we can build that in.
Great. So the next item is the bottleneck grant update.
Yeah, so this one will be a quick one. We have niche engineering. I think I had mentioned this at the joint meeting. Or perhaps not, but we have niche engineering through a grant from MassDOT through the local bottleneck reduction program. They're looking at the traffic detection and equipment at the 3 intersections in the downtown, the 3 main intersections on both ends of the Chestnut and Chapel and Dedham and Highland, and then also at the Chapel and May. So they have they've been reviewing they had observations, they took some traffic data. We provided them with a bunch of data that we had already, and
And they're gonna do this before the redesign of all the intersections that are in the downtown. Anyway.
yeah, well, so the main objective that we're probably getting out of this is upgraded equipment in its existing location. So it's not going to, it shouldn't have a conflict with, especially because the main location that it's not changing the footprint of the existing equipment.
It's like a timing, rephasing.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Detection.
Right.
Upgrading our detection technology to meet modern standards. That is the coordination, like you said, is the biggest piece of it, but we already have some element of that there, but we want it to be more informed by the data rather than sort of cookie cutter.
And this is really a stopgap or a bridge gap between now and whenever the construction design and then eventually construction of the new downtown would look like. This is really about helping with some of those bottlenecks that we all see with congestion, especially when you're taking that left onto GPA from Dedham, and now you're kind of bottleneck there, but
We've got a serious alignment issue in the downtown.
yeah, this is really about just exactly, like you said, timing, adjustments, coordination between the existing signals to flow that traffic.
Yep.
More efficiently.
So the last message I have from the project manager is that we'll be expecting a memo to be sent over in the next 10 days or so. That will summarize the results of their observations and the data that they collected. And then describing their methodology for how they are making these recommendations. And then it's, they're saying one of the points of discussion will be a recommendation for railroad preemption different configuration on that and how they propose to alleviate traffic through the town center when tracks are down. So once we receive that memo, then we'll be meeting as a group with engineering and Shane and myself to see what we can what we think is appropriate, and then we have money through this grant in order to help us implement those upgrades. So
And we'll also pedestrian signal too as well, within that, or just traffic signal.
so this is
I
a
assume it would.
I think this is just traffic because all those signals currently are exclusive signals.
Yeah.
So that means that all lanes in the intersection can go at one time. Certainly, when we're looking at the downtown streetscape, we may reevaluate whether or not it's
think-
always gonna be.
yeah.
exclusive
I mean, I think it's on the
things, or
table.
Whether we'll do concurrent, like some of the other communities like Cambridge and Boston and some of the other.
I just wonder if they're re-signaling. Because the pedestrian signal, it's exclusive, but it only comes on a certain. I don't even know what to call it.
I think they'll take a look at it, whether or not whether or not that
Okay.
pedestrian goes every cycle. or
Yeah,
what-
there's a cycle when the
Yeah.
train is going through
Yeah.
that, all of the car lane, all of the green lights go for the cars each way, and the pedestrian signal never gets it for like 2 or 3 cycles.
Yeah.
I think it's all part of one sort of, we have all the information about the sequences for each of the signals.
Yeah.
And part of that equation is where do we slot in the pedestrians? Do you break it up? I think that's all part of the discussion.
Sure.
Actually, present ICUs are all pretty robust.
The traffic equipment out there currently, yeah, it's new equipment. Yeah, it's-
What you've got, but.
So what
Better
they
than
told
it's
us is it's
been
new
in the
equipment,
past.
but it definitely, they're worried about the communication and some of the. time
Yeah, I think it's more
sequences.
the communication, and the
Communication and
synchronization.
timings, just the syncs.
Yeah, and then we can get better detection out of it and all that, then why not?
Sure, but most of that equipment's only, 7 years old? That project was 2017.
It made a difference.
Yeah,
But there's a lot of regular bypassing, I always go run Oak Street, the bypass, and I'm on foot. I cross the town hall, take the crosswalk there, and go to the post office from Walgreens. I never cross the intersection.
And then let's get the last bullet here, the committee discussion, the future meeting dates.
Mr. Chair, I think we skipped one.
Did I?
Dedham and Webster.
Oh, update on Dedham and Webster, right?
Yeah, so this will be pretty quick. So for Dedham Avenue, we had a community meeting or a neighborhood meeting, about 2 weeks ago. About the proposed crosswalk, on Dedham Avenue across from, or going from George Agate Road across to DeFazio Park. That was a pretty successful meeting. I think that we got a lot of buy-in for the crosswalk. There was a lot of feelings about parking, which we're sort of handling on a separate track, but we want to make sure that that it's understood that we're not encouraging a change in behavior as much as we are formalizing and making an existing behavior safe, right? There's crossing that's happening, everyone sees it. You go down the street, you see kids running. So we're going to be providing the beacon, push button beacons, just like in many other pedestrian heavy areas of town in front of the high school. So right now, we're currently determining if we want to go with if we can do a solar piece of equipment at that location, or if it needs to be hardwired. The other thing is that there's going to be some intersection upgrades at the intersection of Webster and Dedham. We're working through that right now with our traffic signal contractor as well, to see if we can reconfigure the crosswalks a little bit to allow for shorter crossings, which is going to require some changes to the equipment there. So that's what we're currently looking at with that project. The contractors that are going to be doing the curb work and the sidewalk work are currently finishing up the one side of Webster. And after they finish some ADA ramp upgrades in the areas that we're going to be paving, they should be coming down and starting over by Lincoln Street. So they'll be working their way down here, and we're just trying to make sure we have everything resolved before they get to the railroad bridge. We're still waiting on a permit to be cleared for our sidewalk expansion under the bridge. And then Webster, so they have nearly completed all of the ramp upgrades on the eastern side of the street. There are, the designer is working towards final design now, and we should have that for the other pieces. We should have that by the end of this month. And then the curb and sidewalk contractor will go back and do the other side, hopefully closer to the end of school, so that there's no conflict there. And as part of that project, I'll also be working on the bump out that's proposed. That is proposed by Rosemary Street.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah.
No, I have a conflict of interest here because I'm over this committee, but I also live at that intersection.
You know, yeah.
So one question we had was, will that affect any of the landscaping on the private property that abuts the sidewalk?
So there shouldn't be any need to touch the private property. This is all being done in the public way.
Right, but I don't know if some of the landscaping, somebody could. There's a constituent who lives at that house who isn't me, which is my wife. All right, is very concerned about the planting. And what will happen to that when that work happens?
So during the actual work rather than. once it's-
And after, because I don't know where the line is.
So Tyler, I think it might help if, so we do have the.
You have a meeting Thursday.
Tomorrow night. Community meetings tomorrow night.
Is it tomorrow night?
Yes. So the meeting is
Thursday.
tomorrow night, and then what we can do is any questions from there, we can meet with individuals.
Yeah.
Show them go over the plans and those sort of things.
So the plans aren't final yet. They're still
Okay.
being built out. And they haven't been laid out yet. So there's nothing, there hasn't been any paint laid or anything
Okay.
like that. If there is any impact, if there's any foreseen impact to the landscaping, every effort will be made to protect and restore if there's any problem.
Yeah, I'm not seeking any special consideration, just seeking information.
Yeah.
So you
Well,
have
that's not special treat. That would be any of our projects we would.
No, I understand, but I just want to be clear for the record here.
Yeah,
So you haven't had a community meeting yet about on Webster Street?
so it was scheduled for last week, but it got rained out.
Okay.
So it'll be tomorrow night.
So you're talking tomorrow night at what time?
5:30, I think. Yeah.
5:30 and that's at the intersection of,
In front of the high school by the intersection with Brookline.
okay.
Okay, let's move on to the next one. Community discussion on future meeting dates. So our charge says it will at least meet semi-annually for the joint meetings and then as often as needed. Is there any input on how many meetings you think we should have?
I think, I don't know if it's necessarily going to set an ideal frequency forever, probably. 4 really might be about right, but I think the timetable for the scope in this project of the master plan is really the most important thing in front of us.
Yeah.
I remember, I seem to recall the first meeting, there was discussion on perhaps the first year the group meets monthly for the first year to really get things established. And then at the end of that year, talking about whether or not that should be, if it should continue monthly or if it should go to every other month or if it should go to quarterly. I don't think that the group made a decision there on that first meeting, but I think this first year we had talked about whether or not we should just for the year, meet monthly, just to kind of get things rolling, but I don't have the notes like Paul does, and I know he's referencing them now, so.
Anything like that.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, I guess eventually we would probably need to meet 4 times before the joint meeting, just to discuss what we're gonna talk about in the joint meeting like we did now, so that would be 4. And then, a few others, so it gets pretty packed anyways, but I'm happy to keep on meeting monthly, for now, as long as this information.
So we certainly, when we created this committee and we spoke to the select board about creating this committee, we certainly don't want to overburden anyone with the time commitments or those sort of things. Because we do realize this is all volunteer time, but at the same time, we wanted to get the frequency to where it's meaningful and fruitful.
I'm happy to have it monthly, and then if there's no reason to meet on a particular month, to cancel.
Yeah, why don't I talk to Travis at MAPC and see how feasible it is for him to join us at these meetings, and then that might be informative on how often we meet, because that is the main task at the moment. Okay.
And I think just what I would say is between the committee members is if you're finding that it's not as fruitful or that we're discussing the same thing, then maybe that's a signal that we back down in some of the meetings and the biggest key will be just getting the communication out to the public, since they are public meetings that.
I just told everyone in the last meeting that we meet every Monday, so.
Yeah. So we'll just need to make sure that whatever the committee decides, that we advertise it. So we're not in any kind of violation of open meeting law.
Well, I have to make a couple of tweaks to the site or the webpage to add James and everything, so. I have access to that page, so if you want to change any information on it as to when we're meeting, I can always do that.
And then the other thing, Tyler, we may want to just check with Paris and select board is, do we need to go back to the select board to let them know how often this committee meets?
Yeah, I'm not sure. what role-
Is it
The charge says at least semi-annually, so
Yeah,
as long as we meet semi-annually, I think.
Then you're good to
we're
go.
within it,
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
as long as everyone agrees to.
So it may just be informational back to the select board once the group makes a decision on how often we're meeting.
Yeah. Justin might have some, he said that he couldn't make it tonight. He texted me earlier, right as we were starting, but, he might have an opinion on that as well.
Okay. Okay, a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second. This is the, oh, how do I finish it? How do I finish it?
Just take a roll, take a
Oh, yeah,
voice
okay.
vote.
Right, Mo,
Yes.
Duncan? Yes. Paul?
Yes.
And the chair votes aye. The minute's over?
Sounds great.
All right.
Thank you.
Perfect timing.